This subreddit is called Phantom Borders. Basically, we're talking an invisible border that follows the path of a former political border, even though it's no longer officially recognized today. So even though we're going to be looking at current maps from the present day, we're going to be learning a lot about history. This might be one of the most famous examples. On the left, we have city names in Poland ending with OWO, and on the right, city names in Poland ending with just O and W. As you can see, it's all in the south. And if you know just a little bit about Polish history, it's not too hard to figure out why. I mean, this was the full borders of the German Empire about 100 years ago, but we could also mention the migration of Poland over time. Historically, the country has been pushed further and further east. Anyways, they now just need more towns ending with the name Uwu. That'll complete the puzzle. Yeah, talk about a fantastic GeoGuessr tip. If you're in Poland, just look at the city names. Percentage of Nazi jokes in 1932 versus the percentage of Catholics in Germany at that time 2 years later. The black counties were showing more support versus the white counties that were not. Overlay this with the amount of Catholics in the country at that time. This is where all the Catholics were actually living. And it's apparently because that German party at this time didn't really like the Catholics all that much. So you can obviously see that reflected in these borders here. It's definitely making me think back about the Holy Roman Empire in this same part of the world. There was also a center Catholic party at that time the Catholics were more likely to vote for. This is the most impressive phantom border I've ever seen. It lines up exactly. The European Union's GDP per capita versus Charlemagne's empire borders. I should mention right now, some of this stuff is just a coincidence, but it is still really fascinating. I mean, minus the UK, since they weren't in Charlemagne's empire, this map is pretty much exact, extending from Austria to parts of northern Italy to this part of Spain. And I could probably try to come up with like dozens of different explanations for this, but who knows? Charlemagne's empire collapsed over 1,000 years ago, so it's kind of hard to say. To those saying correlation is not causation, you are correct, but that's not the point of this sub. We're just looking at phantom borders. Some people are claiming it's all about the rivers, baby. Which European country has the largest number of metal bands? And this map, funny enough, is kind of a throwback to like 1700s Europe. I mean, the fragmentation going on in Germany and Italy at this time, although they were the Holy Roman Empire. You can even begin to see maybe an Austria-Hungary union about to form. You can combine all the blue nations out here in the east as the giant Russian Empire at that time. This is an exact explanation for why this part of the world doesn't have very many metal bands. It all started with that Russian Tsar, damn it. No, but infamously, of course, the Nordics have some of the most metal bands on Earth. Finland only has like 5 million people living in it, yet there's 905. Oh, that's metal bands per 1 million, so they definitely have like close to 5,000. That is so many metal bands. Like everyone and their uncle got one of those. Who could have guessed the origins of metal music stems back to the 1700s? Just kidding, but I like to think that way. The Taiwanese 2024 presidential election versus their ethnic linguistic makeup. As you can see, the island of Taiwan is getting divided completely down the middle here. Meanwhile, the map on the right, specifically with the red around it, is the indigenous area. Clearly, this is still being reflected today when it comes to elections. And it's funny because Taiwan is not the only one. You could probably find maps like this in pretty much every country. Again, though, correlation does not equal causation necessarily. Today, I learned about the indigenous people of Taiwan. I actually didn't even consider that. They are, in fact, somehow linked to the Polynesians, some of the greatest sailors in the world, getting to the island of Taiwan somewhere around 3000 BC. Of course, on the other side of things, we're talking about the Chinese Civil War that happened in the 50s and the exodus the Republic of China had to do to get to Taiwan as the communists took over and have been in charge since then. Interestingly, since the 1990s, more and more people have identified themselves as just Taiwanese on the island, and almost none of them today are calling themselves solely Chinese. Now, this is a very fascinating phantom border map because it actually ended up predicting the future. This map is from April 2010, and in green we have the regions with over 200 times as many Muslims than Christians, and in the dark blue over 200 times as many Christians than Muslims. So this continent has been divided like this for centuries at this point. However, if you look closely enough, you can see that the borders aren't quite accurate. That is because the newest nation on Earth, South Sudan, eventually got its independence, becoming politically recognized as of 2011, 1 year later. I mean, again, this doesn't explain everything that was going on at this time, but it is interesting that these phantom borders can sometimes do something like that. They can predict problems and issues and why certain areas of the country votes in elections the way they do. Do you pronounce the letter R in arm? This is a throwback in England in the year 1950. So in the red, these counties are saying arm with the R. And in the green, they are often not. They're saying probably not like that, but you know, I've got my United States accent. So we're comparing that phantom border to the old Viking invasion of these islands. In red, as you can see, that was formerly Danish or Norwegian controlled territory. Again, we're talking Viking invasion. We have the English up here, Wessex and its dependencies, as well as English Mercia. Now, I'm not a linguistic expert, so I don't know if I can say there's a correlation here. They spoke Old Norse as opposed to Old English, a very similar language, but whose effect can still be detected in differences in dialects and accents. Interesting that the English word for arm is also used in Danish. Wow, it's still like that. Even though I'm sure those two languages languages have changed so much since the 800s. Just for anyone curious, nowadays, pretty much no one pronounces the R part in It's funny, this is also giving me like kind of a Boston, Massachusetts accent as well. Obviously, that city has some connection to over here. Getting the ka. Anyways, the Danish with another dub over England. There it is. The R isn't pronounced in Danish either. An Indian map showing wheat versus rice and the phantom borders connecting with what percentage of Indian population is vegetarian. As you can see, the regions that are using mostly wheat are overwhelmingly mostly vegetarian as well. I don't even really know where to begin to come up with an explanation for that. I mean, rice is vegetarian, right? Or is there something I'm missing? I'm disappointed in myself that I even had to Google that. I'm like, what is going on? I mean, it's even vegan as well. Maybe it's more of what you pair with rice. Maybe more meat products would come with your dish of rice. Again, I've said it so many times, correlation, not causation. I wonder if it's related to wheat having about twice as much protein as rice. Also, rice is really awesome with meat. That's what I was thinking. Fish can also be a big part of the puzzle that we're missing, since a lot of these regions over here are coastal, of course, and besides this area, most of the counties in India that are vegetarian are landlocked. Just something to note. I guess you can still eat fish from like the rivers and things, but now more often than not, when discussing phantom borders, Germany always comes up. We've already discussed Germany here a couple times in this video, but that is because there is an unbelievable amount of maps that reflect what Germany used to look like just like 30 years ago. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if the whole idea of phantom borders really just came from this country alone, because still to this day, pretty much everything Germany does, you can still see the echoes of East Germany. The population is still quite different. This specific map that we're talking about is referring to a federal election. Black is a preference for the center-right party, meanwhile the blue is just a straight-up right-wing party. And when it comes to geopolitics and other places around the world, phantom borders in Germany often gets talked about when discussing the unification of Korea maybe one day. If this were to somehow happen and we just get one united Korea, you better believe we're gonna see phantom borders between the north and the south reflected for like, I'm thinking at least maybe 100 years. I mean, the divide between these places have been going on for so long, it might take 3-4 generations to really begin to forget about it. Because also keep in mind, North Korea has existed for a lot longer than East Germany ever did. Phantom borders and election maps go hand in hand. Here is the US presidential election in 1924. The South overwhelmingly voting Democrat or Davis. Meanwhile, the red states voting Coolidge, who won at that time, and his victory was pretty dominant too. I don't even think I need to really show the map that this compares to, but yeah, here it is, the Confederate States of America. And that was a throwback to 100 years ago. You can still see phantom maps that show and reflect this in the US today. Which type of restaurant is more popular in Europe? In red, we have local cuisines. Meanwhile, in blue, we have foreign cuisines. And of course, we're comparing that to the former Roman Empire borders. Now, there's a lot to be said about this. Maybe we can't actually find a reason behind this, but it is pretty funny because man, oh man, are these borders pretty similar. Maybe this is what helped the Roman Empire conquer so much. They just had the superior cuisine. Everyone wanted to be Roman after that. I wonder if the Roman Empire just helped the cuisine science of each nation flow. I don't know what the hell I'm saying. It let it flourish a little bit. Let them try their own stuff. It's more like Mediterranean climate equals good food at home. Yeah, that kind of helps. England kind of throws this off. No, what's the theory here? That's the one outlier. Ooh, now this is an interesting one. Provinces in Vietnam by GDP per capita. As you can see, the south here is a lot more richer than a really large portion of the north. And that's clearly a throwback to the old Vietnam War. The northern side was communist and the southern side was supported by the US. Now there's probably a lot of explanations for why the south could be richer. So many that it's really hard to say, but it is very interesting comparison. Kind of also a reference to the Korean Peninsula, like we talked about, the north versus the south. The border between the north and south only existed for 22 years. There's probably something else going on here. Like I said, that's definitely possible. Yes, countries that have had Domino's Pizza versus countries never visited by a sitting US president. Our presidents are only going to come to you if you got good pizza, or I guess good pizza compared to us. I'm sure the Italians would disagree. Again, this video is really hard to do because there's a lot of other explanations for this. Sitting US presidents are probably not traveling to these places, not exactly because there's no Domino's Pizza, but there is probably an overarching theme here. I mean, if you have a Domino's Pizza, then you have American companies in your country. That means you're important to the US, which means the US president is more likely to visit you. You know, maybe that's something along those lines. If you don't have any Domino's Pizza, maybe you've closed yourself off. Although you could always have like other American chains. Maybe you just don't like pizza, specifically Domino's Pizza. I get it. Domino's wasn't that good that long ago. I like it now though. I guess unless you're Argentina, you don't need a Domino's and the president will still come visit you. Overlap between the long gone Incan Empire and today's European genetic mixture. So here is that former Incan Empire, and I'm sure other indigenous people here here, and actually Latin America talks about this all the time. There's plenty of memes about it. I mean, the people specifically living in these Andes mountains here, I mean, they have very little European ancestry. It should be noted though that this does extend to parts of Mexico and Central America, also Haiti, interestingly enough, but the amount of European admixture is so low. So we're talking less than 20% in a lot of those regions, specifically Peru, and this might have to do with geography in a way. I mean, obviously the Spanish who colonized the vast majority of Latin America, maybe they just didn't get that far in these mountains. They probably did just stay along the coast here, provide for the big old Spanish Empire. Could be one explanation. Meanwhile, Argentina be like, there is something similar going on with the Aztec and Mayan parts of Mexico as well. Now, due to topography, I think that's really what this is coming down to. I mean, just look at the mountains. Like, it really just comes down to that. It was probably hard for the Europeans, specifically the Spanish, to just get up there. They might not have even wanted to have done that. Probably extends to those parts of Mexico as well. Anyways, a lot of these maps have several different explanations. The comment section should be very interesting. Let me know down below. Big thanks to my patrons this month. Kansas was mentioned. KingBearHaze. JohnDenver. I can't sleep without Drew's voice. DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood. Archaeology. aPhatNarwhal. Carmel S. Connor Pavlik. DOOCHBAGGINS. Fredrik Tibblin. Tambre. KirinoIsBestGirl. Sebby, if you hear this, I love you. The Mexican 760.